Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Carlo Perza MMA. Today I have a UFC veteran. He is UFC veteran, bantamweight fighter, Mr. Frankie Saenz. Frankie, how's it going, my friend? How are you doing tonight?
I'm pretty good, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Awesome to have you on the show. Really enjoyed watching your career. You're part of the UFC, had a very lengthy run in the UFC, and really, you started doing this stuff at a time where MMA was not as culturally accepted as what it is today. 15, 20 years ago, people were thinking this is the wild, wild west. People calling it human cockfighting. It wasn't legalized everywhere. Some crazy stuff. When you first started getting into this, the early days, the early promotions, do you have any stories, maybe mystery opponents fighting outside, fighting in bars, barns, bad medicals, anything crazy?
I got in a little bit later. Like, I'm an older guy, but I got in. Shoot, I think I took my first fight at 29. So that was like 2009. Around that time. And yeah, I still see the same crazy stuff going on in these local promotions, like that I was that I was in back in the day. But yeah, I fought outside. I fought different organizations where guys would show up like 10 pounds overweight, and you're just like, dude, what? And then, you're there to fight, so you just fight. You're like, all right, well, I guess I'm just going to fight this guy because I'm here and my family's here and everybody came to watch, so I guess I'm going to fight him. Um, but yeah, there was some crazy times. I remember, shoot, I started dating my fiance at the time. I probably dated her a few months before I even told her that I fought. And I was like couple amateur fights in, and I just so happened to like get a fight on Strike Force when Strike Force was in, and had to tell her because I was on like 2 weeks notice. And I'm like, I guess I'm fighting in like 2 weeks. I know you didn't know I fought, but I'm a fighter.
What was that whole experience like? I thought that was really cool. Obviously, Strike Force at the time, big promotion. Let amateurs come on the card, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was just the gym owner at the time had a connection with the matchmaker with Coker, and then he ended up getting me a fight on there. I fought at 155. So it's like, hey, we got a fight for you, but it's at 155. Do you want it? And I'm like, I guess, yeah. And that back then I was just game to fight. I hadn't made the 35, 35-pound weight class yet. I was still trying to figure out if I was cut out for this kind of occupation.
One of my favorite regional promotions from back in the day, one that I loved watching, was King of the Cage. Obviously, you had a lot of success there, holding gold, winning a championship, and defending it multiple times. How did you enjoy that promotion?
I enjoyed it. So I started like a fight team back at the Lions Den where we were in Scottsdale. We had a Lions Den back then, and I started a fight team, which is now like the Fight Ready fight team. Um, but I was, kind of younger in that stuff, so I just started reaching out to different promoters for my fighters. I said, hey, I got this guy. He wants to fight. He's game to fight on your card. I know you guys are coming to town, and kind of sprinkle my name in there too. I said, hey, I'm a fighter too, so if you guys have any, any offers or whatever, I'm cutting to 135. And yeah, just made a relationship with the matchmaker. And shoot, my first fight was for a title at 135. I think they called it flyweight. But yeah, and I loved it. I only fought like in my hometown, so like it was Scottsdale where they went, and I fought in Scottsdale. I didn't really travel, but I sold a bunch of tickets, and like that was the biggest promotion I was on at that point. And, they paid the most money. I think I started off maybe like I don't even know, maybe a thousand and a thousand. Like back then for a title fight, and they had us fight like 5 rounds, so you didn't make anything. You had to sell tickets to make money.
I feel like there's so many fans who watch the sport in this day and age, which is amazing. But, I feel like they look at the big names, the Pereiras, the Joneses, the Stipes, and they're like, these fighters, this must be amazing. This is the best job ever. Little do they know, man, to battle it out on the regional scene and to even get to a point where you can do that, some of the hardest things you can do, as you just pointed out, you're not getting paid much fighting regionally and locally. You're just not. A lot of guys have 9-to-5 jobs. Some have kids, wives. You have to pay to train. You have to deal with guys who want it just as bad as you every single day to try to chase his dream. You've done this for a while. You stuck with it for quite a lot of years. Why did you stick with it that long?
I don't know. Like I wrestled I wrestled in high school, college. I was state champ. Was an All-American in high school, and so I was just always like, I always felt like I had the ability. Um, and once I started, like I fell in love with it. And I'm like, and I'm one of those guys. I started late, so I already had a full-time job. I already knew what that life was like. And I'm like, man, it sucked. I'm like, I hate going to work. Like, I love working, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do. Like, I wasn't like a 9-to-5 kind of guy. I'd rather, put my body through the fire kind of thing and really test myself athletically. Um, so, I was just driven. I wasn't sure if that was the right thing to do. I mean, at an early as an early pro, I think I lost my third and fourth fight. So I think that's when you lose a lot of guys. If they lose early, life gets in the way. All this stuff because like you're saying, it's hard. Like you're broke. You're fighting for nothing back then. You're just trying to make whatever money you can at the time. And luckily I didn't have any kids or anything at that point, and I was able to do it. I couldn't imagine like having kids and being able to fight and support them, and support my dream, and just keep all that in line.
Following the King of the Cage days, you've made it to the UFC. You remember where you were when you got the phone call that you're getting signed with the UFC?
Yeah, I think I was just hanging out with my family, and I won like 3 fights in a row, King of the Cage, and I signed my own contract. I was my own manager at the time. And I just, I had 2 fights, and I said, hey, I want an out clause after 2 fights. So they gave me a 4-fight deal. After 2 fights, I could sign with the UFC or Bellator. You remember World Series of Fighting back then?
Oh, yeah.
So they approached me to sign me, but I didn't have them in my contract that I could get out of my contract to go fight for them, which was a blessing now. But yeah, back then it was like, and I was pretty bitter about it back then, but looking back, I'm like, shoot, it's kind of a blessing that I didn't go that route, and ended up getting that UFC call on like 2 weeks notice. I think I was like 20 to 25 pounds overweight, and it's one of those things. It's your dream. So if they call, you're taking it, like regardless of the sacrifice that you got to, to get down to weight. I think I was like holding a beer possibly, and I'm just like put the beer down, like made a conversation. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm fighting. Like I'm definitely fighting. Like where are we going? I didn't have a manager, like I said, I was my own manager. But I remember talking to a guy who was trying to manage me, and I was like, if you get me in the UFC, dude, you're my manager. And then yeah, he called me. It's like, I got you in. I was like, sweet, let's do it.
I hear from so many guys, get that phone call 2 weeks before the fight, 3 weeks before the fight. Is that just a testament, man, to do this at the highest level? Do you really have to be just training year round?
Yeah, you do. Once you get to that point, you kind of know, and I train a lot of younger guys now and stuff, and you try to get to that point where, hey, you put a couple wins together, you're sitting at 7, 8 wins, something around that. You're on that short list of calls. It's like, hey man, you got to stay ready, because now we know, even myself, like King of the Cage was trying to get me to fight another fight and sign a bout agreement, and I wouldn't do it because I just knew, I'm like, man, I'm gonna get the call, I know it, and it's just about, yeah, being ready for that call. I mean, I was training, I was just heavy, but yeah, it was, just happened to be a good opportunity, and I was training with Henry Cejudo at the time, and he just got in. Like there's a few guys that get in and get enough time to prepare for fights, and they're gonna sign a talent like him before a guy like me. Like I'm a short notice guy, to get in. Like he's a prospect.
You know,
So just had a good opportunity, had some good coaches, had a good team behind me, and was able to go in there and get a win.
Following your entry into the UFC, you go on that 3-fight win streak, did some great things, made a lot of splashes in the division. Then you got yourself a huge fight against Uriah Faber on really what probably is one of the biggest cards ever in UFC history, that Aldo versus McGregor. Absolutely electric environment in there, tons of Irish fans. That fight card's going to go down in history. What was it like to be part of that?
And that was a great experience. Something I'll never forget. I remember, I was on that 3-fight win streak. I was in the top 15, and I was like, man, I gotta climb fast, because at that point, I think I was probably 34, 35. So I'm like, man, I got a short window to try to make some moves. And I saw, like, back then, I think he did that show with McGregor, the Ultimate Fighter or something leading up to that. And he was supposed to fight Brian Caraway on like another card, headlining it. And I was reading an article, and it said Brian Caraway pulled out of the fight, and I'm like, dang, I called my manager. I said, hey man, do you think I could get this Uriah Faber fight? Like he's looking for somebody to fight him. And he's like, shoot, let me call. So he gave Sean a call, and then he called me back like, a little bit later, and shoot, it was like a done deal. He was like, hey man, you got that fight? And I'm like, dude, yes. And that was the first time I really had like 10 weeks or something like that to train for it. But, a McGregor fight's just something different. Like if you go in there, it's electric. Like he shuts down Vegas. Like it's like Ireland over there. It's insane. So you're walking around, people are partying, like fight week, and you're staying at the MGM. You're just walking around. You just feel the energy, from the fans, from everybody around that. It's just a big fight.
I think love it or hate him, and no one can say that Conor McGregor really did not revolutionize the sport. And I think a way in which he did, personality and entertainment. That is something that we're seeing a lot more in this day and age. Maybe the cheat code, if you will. Some guys put on facades. They be these characters. They be people that they're totally not, because they know they're going to get the title shots. They know they're going to get paid more. Some of them say, this is what I have to do to make a living in sport. My family doing this. How has personality affected the fight game?
I mean, big, if you can sell yourself as, somebody like that, like, you can tell like guys that aren't genuine, I think pretty early on, you're like, oh, that's not that guy, because when you meet everybody, it's like most martial artists are pretty humble, when it comes to just, behind closed doors and not trying to sell stuff. But you have to do that in the fight game. It's kind of become like the WWE, where it's entertainment, and you got to be out there. You got to be entertaining. You got to get on different cards. You got to want people that want to watch you, fight. And, I just think it's just become more a part of mixed martial arts now is that part of it is just being entertaining. Sometimes saying stuff that you don't normally, you normally wouldn't say. You're almost like a character, like what you're saying. And I think Conor was probably the most, I guess, genuine, because I felt like that was his personality anyways, is just talking shit, and he was really good at it. Like he just was quick to come back with guys, and you don't see a lot of guys like that. I mean, like Chael Sonnen was good, I'm not seeing, that many guys. I mean, they try to do it, but it's not the same.
In this day and age of the UFC, there's so many different shows. I mean, they're putting on shows, I think like 40 dates at least a year. It's crazy. When I first grew up watching the sport, you wouldn't see as many shows. I remember in like 2011, 2012, like that summer stretch, maybe you had 3 or 4 shows in there. It wasn't as much. And now, I guess there's some pros and cons to it. Some people say the mystique isn't there as it once was back in the day. But now, obviously, it's easier for guys to get in the show, the UFC. You're seeing a lot more regional talent get there. How do you think the sport has changed, specifically in the UFC, over the years?
Um, yeah, just like you're saying, I mean, there's more opportunities for young guys coming up, getting in, and even opportunities for fighters coming in because sometimes, you fight once or twice a year because the amount of shows, and the amount of fighters, like you're not going to get in, and you have to be winning for people to want to watch you, right? So I think it's better in that aspect that it's a little better to I guess be full time as a fighter now because you're able to get those fights. I think a lot early on, like when I started, it was 8-8, 8-8 to fight, and then shoot. So if you lost that fight, I mean, you're making $8,000, and you're probably not getting another fight. Maybe one more within a year. How do you live off $8,000? Like it's crazy. I mean, even 16,000 back then. I was like, oh well, it was a big chunk of change at one time. And then it's just like, all right, well, when's the next one? So you got to try to make a living, making just little chunks, and I just saw something with shoot, who was it? Where he showed up and his fighter was sick or something like that, and then he ended up not getting his show money, just for showing up.
It's Chris Weidman.
Chris Weidman. I mean, that's happened to me too. Like I showed up fight week, I was supposed to fight Chito Vera, and the doctors didn't clear him to fight. I show up, I'm ready to fight. It's week of, and they're like, "Hey, man, no fight. Pretty much you're out of luck. We're gonna rebook you for a couple weeks later." I mean, that screws your whole camp up. Like, dude, I'm ready to fight right now. It's like, oh, he's not ready to fight, so it's just, I guess that's the problem with it is just compensating, the fighters in the fight game. Just going. I mean, there's a full camp that was had. You're preparing for this fight. Just because your opponent, isn't ready to go and it's time to go, like it's just like no money, no nothing. I mean, that's just a hard pill to swallow at that point.
I think that's something else that these casual fans don't fully realize is, they may look on the websites and see what people are making, someone, all right, 12 and 12. Oh, they won. They made 24 grand. Yeah, but it's not 24 grand. If you want, could you break down the different fees associated? Like, how does it work with flights? How many extra flights? How many extra hotel management fee costs? You want to break that stuff down?
Yeah, I mean, the UFC pays for one room and one coach. You don't see just one coach in the corner. There's three coaches in the corner, so those two coaches are on the fighter's dime. So if they want to fly out, depending on the flight, like if you're flying across the country, you gotta fly these guys out. And it's $1,000 a flight sometimes. Depending on where you're going, where you're fighting, and how long a notice you have. Before that fight happens. Um, your gym will take 10%, your management will take 10%, and that's not even your coaches, like, so coaches typically make anywhere from 5 to 10%, like per coach, so you're paying out, and I was one of those guys, like I took care of my guys, right? Like I'm paying out my coaches, I'm paying my manager, um, whatever, and then whatever fees are incurred, like, I got to pay those two extra flights. I don't like sleeping for adult men in one room, so you get another room, that's another cost. Uh, and then everything else that goes into it, right? Like you go to fight week, you get a per diem, but you don't want your coaches paying for their own meals and stuff when they're on a trip with you. Training partners, you got to help those guys out too. Sometimes you're like, hey man, this guy's been with me all camp. I got to throw him a bone. Hey, so here's $1,000, here's $500. Those are typically like other fighters, young fighters. So there's a lot that goes into all that stuff. Like you're saying, like they pay for one coach and one fighter, and that's it. And the rest of it's on the fighter. And if
And
you're making
that's
8-8, 10-10, Like that doesn't go very far.
And you mentioned fees before we even start thinking of tax.
Yeah, yeah, that's before taxes. You're paying everybody out. I mean, I fought in Brazil my second fight. And I made 10-10. And I mean, I didn't know I was going to make 10-10. That could have been just 10. But just flying my guys out. I flew my coach, Henry Cejudo, with me, and then I flew my dad out. But it was like, and then that was back when I wasn't making any money, so we all stayed in one room. It's like, hey, we're all roughing it. We're staying in one room, and then but we went out there early, because you try to acclimate. When you go out to these other countries, because the UFC will fly you out on Tuesday. So I think I got out there like Sunday just to get a couple days, and then by Tuesday I started like adjusting to the time. But yeah, like you're saying, you don't get that full 10-10. I mean, that goes, you maybe get 10 after all that.
You're from Arizona. Obviously, a lot of great fighters training in Arizona right now. You have the Fight Ready boys. You have the MMA lab up there. Some great talent. MMA just professionally legalized in Arizona, I believe, in 2013. Not that long ago. How big was that for the state and just mixed martial arts in general?
Yeah, I think big. I think just because like you said, there's just a lot of talent. I mean, I think back then, ACS was promote or Arizona Combat Sports was producing like the most fighters back then. I mean, it's like Jamie Varner, like CB Dalloway, Ryan Bader, you know, just to name a few of those guys that came out of there. But no, I mean it was big, coming out here. I mean, I don't know why Arizona became this landing spot for a lot of people coming to fight, but um, but yeah, we're lucky to be here, and lucky to have all the people coming in, traveling, and making us better. Building fight teams. But the problem is like there's not enough promotions to support all these fighters, right? Like so, I think over here we have rough rough promotion. Um, LFA will come to town maybe a couple times a year, and then a couple amateur kind of promotions that are hit and miss, like out in Tucson. There's another an amateur promotion, but there's not a whole lot. So you have all these fighters, and there's nowhere to fight. So now it just becomes like, hey, can we travel? Like, hey, let's go to Vegas, or Vegas isn't far. Let's go to California. That's not far, but every commission requires different sets of licensing. So you got to pay that kind of stuff. Whatever fees if they won't accept whatever Arizona requires, and you got to add that on to people that already aren't making money to go fight somewhere else just to get fights. Because it probably costs you more money to get out there rather than how much you're going to make in the promotion.
One guy who fights out of Arizona, they've already mentioned Henry Cejudo, obviously the king of cringe, a guy who went on double champ, became one of the biggest stars in mixed martial arts. What made him so special?
Work ethic. I think just early on, like, I don't know, people don't know this, but my dad was his coach in kids club coming up. So he started wrestling for my dad in fifth grade. Um, and then she was a national champion, I think, by seventh grade. And, ended up moving the Olympic Training Center at his junior year. So he did his junior and senior year living at the Olympic Training Center, along with his brother. His brother's like a four-time state champ. He's from Arizona, so a couple years older than Henry. So he got an opportunity to go out there, but I think him, and he was under Terry Bryan's out at the OTC. So it's like, I don't know. I always think it's like going to the Harvard of wrestling, right? Like you're going out there, you're getting coached by the best guys, living in the Olympic Training Center. All these guys are coming in, high level guys from either other countries or from the U.S. Competing in high level tournaments. So I think that's his advantages his work ethic was just on another level. He worked so hard for so long in the hardest sport in the world, wrestling, that MMA was an easy transition for him. And with him and his first shot at Mighty Mouse, like he just wasn't ready. Like they were trying to push him through. They were like, "Hey, you're the next guy, Olympic gold medalist, youngest Olympic gold medalist at that time." And their UFC was really trying to push him through to get that next competition for Mighty Mouse. But yeah, he just wasn't ready. He just didn't have the experience, and that was basically his downfall for the first one. But you've seen how he came back and kind of figured that part out. But nobody was outworking Henry. At the time when he was younger, he was just on another level.
He really has taken on and beat some of the greatest that this sport has to offer. But, one guy he couldn't get past is someone you got past. That's the current bantamweight champion in Merab Dvalishvili. Obviously now how big of a name he is that one that you take a lot of pride in?
Yeah, like I remember like my friends talking shit because he took me down so many times. They're like, "Dude, you just let him take you down? Like, would you forget how to wrestle?" And I'm like, "Dude, like you guys don't even understand like how good this guy is." I got him pretty early on, and yeah, I mean he was just wrestling it, and it's funny because in those fights, it's pretty small. Like we're all staying in the same hotel, and so after the fight, like we all get on a shuttle, go back to the airport. And so I got my family at the hotel and like him and his team wherever at the hotel. And so we're the only two guys like that show up to the shuttle like when we're leaving, after the fight. So we already fought, and we're like, we have to drive to the airport together, afterward. And it was just kind of funny because we were talking about, we were just chatting it up like after that, and I was like, he's like, "Once you need me, man," he's like, "I knew I had to wrestle you because I need him pretty early in the fight and I hurt him, and I was just like, and yeah, that's what he told me. He's like, "Dude, I knew I had to just wrestle you." But yeah, he wasn't, he was pretty early in his career at that point. I think I already had like maybe 6 fights in the UFC or something like that, so he was, yeah, he just didn't know. Just a little inexperience.
Did you give any advice to Cejudo or O'Malley before they fought him?
Yeah, I went in and helped O'Malley a little bit, like not very much, just minimal. I gave him a little look for Merab, but no, not as much as I could have helped. Henry didn't use me at all. He used me for Aljamain a little bit. I helped him out some, and then yeah, when he fought Merab, I wasn't part of that camp. I
Merab,
could have.
Merab taking on Umar Nurmagomedov now, a fight that just got announced. What are your thoughts on that one? Who do you got?
Oh man, I mean, just Merab. Merab's on a roll, right now. I think he's one of those guys like you're gonna have to knock him out, just because his gas tank's just on another level. Like even for me, I'm like a cardio guy. Like I'm like a push the pace kind of fighter. And I remember like every, in the corner, my coach telling me when we were fighting, he's like, push the pace, push the pace. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't think this guy's getting tired. Like for me, I'm like, dude, I'm getting tired. Like, but no, I think Merab, he just puts too much pressure on you where you're like, you're constantly defending the takedown, to where it's like, oh man, you can't really get comfortable on your feet. As soon as you get comfortable on your feet, he's taking you down again, and that's the hard part is like a lot of these guys just don't know how to get up. That's a big thing in MMA. It's just like you get taken down, like you can't let guys just lay on you and control you. You got to get back up, get back to your feet, get to the fence, something, just to keep the fight up. And I think that was my advantage against him is, he would take me down, I'm bouncing, I'm back up. They would take me down, boom, I'm back up, which eventually got him exhausted too. Like he was exhausted after 3 rounds with me.
What are you up to these days, man? What's life been like after fighting?
Just training. I got some young fighters I'm training. Um, and it's hard. Like it's in my blood, to be a coach. And I like that the MMA platform. I love coaching fighters. Like I love watching, guys or girls succeed, and get to that next level. And I feel like I have a lot to offer, being in that. There's not a lot of coaches that have my experience, so I have that, in my back pocket, as far as nutrition, cutting weight, overall game plan, mental state, going into fights. So I feel like I have a lot to offer, like these young fighters that are coming up. And, I've grown to love just coaching and mentoring, so just plan on growing and getting better. And I, coach a lot of kids too. Like I love doing that too.
Have you ever considered or maybe got approached by any of the bare knuckle promotions since your departure in the UFC?
Oh man, I would never do bare knuckle. I would never do bare knuckle. But no, I mean, I still am on UFC contract, oddly enough. So if I ever did decide like, hey, I want to fight again, it would be in the UFC.
You mentioned you coach some guys now, trying to help them get to where you were. Do you try to make them realize that fighting, you only have such a short window? Do you try to stress, maybe think of things outside of fighting, just in case?
No, because I think it's one of those things where fighting you have to go all in, and if you're thinking about other things, you're not gonna make it. Yeah, set yourself up for sure. Put money away, be smart about it. Have that fallback plan. But I can't be invested in two things, right? Because you see those guys that are like, dude, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. It's like, well, if you do that, then you're probably not gonna make it. In this sport, right? In this sport, it's like, playing poker. It's like you got to go all in, to figure out if you have it or not, and just being smart about your money and your finances and stuff like that is just part of it, because not everybody makes $1 million. Most people don't make $1 million, and most people don't, get to the title fight, where you're making all that money. So, it's just part about being smart, but it just you can't be half in and make it. I've never seen guys succeed doing that.
All right, last question for you, Frankie. Do you think in one way or another you're going to be involved in combat sports forever?
Yeah, I mean, some kind of sport, right? Like as I'm a wrestler, by nature. I have a son. I have a son who is gonna wrestle. Like there's no doubt about it. So yeah, I mean, I would like to, be involved in combat sports. I love the commentary side of things. Maybe doing a little bit more of that. But I love coaching. Like I want to build some champions. Whether it be fighting, wrestling, whatever. I feel like I have a lot to offer, and and I know the right way to get there. Even though I didn't get there fighting wise, just learn from my mistakes, and be able to pass that on to the next generation or whoever else I'm coaching.
Frankie, man, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking to me tonight. I really appreciate your time and love talking about your career, my friend.
Thanks a lot, Carlo. I appreciate the time, brother.
Absolutely. That's it for us tonight. That is Mr. Frankie Saenz, Fight Dr. Carlo Prusa. Stick around, fight fans.
See ya.